All right, so you need a simple live streaming setup. Maybe you're a church, some other kind of live venue, some small local government organization, you want to stream your meetings, whatever it is. But say you want a live streaming setup for that kind of environment, what do you actually really need since there are so many options available today? I did a video about this a couple of years ago, but time and technology has moved on a little bit, so I thought it was time to give it an update. So here is my updated video on what it is that I think it makes a great, wonderful, robust live streaming setup that will give you all the options you need, but not be so complicated that it becomes hard for a volunteer or just an amateur to use. So let's take a look to see what we have on the bench. To start, you're going to need something to do the streaming, right? I mean, you're going to need something that can take input from all the various places and then offer that up to the world. So previously I recommended the ATEM Mini, and today I still recommend pretty much anybody who asks the ATEM Mini, but they actually no longer make the original ATEM Mini. They only make the ATEM Mini Pro, which is what this is, and they are selling it now at the same price point as the previous ATEM Mini. So the Pro model gives you some couple of enhancements that are actually really handy. One is this is an HDMI switcher. So it takes multiple HDMI inputs in this form factor. It takes up to 4. So think up to 4 cameras, or maybe 2 or 3 cameras, and then a feed from your computer where you may be running slides or other presentation materials, whatever it is. It allows you to switch between 4, do some basic picture-in-picture built into the unit itself, just on the unit itself, which is handy. And if you have this plugged into the internet through the network port on the back, you can actually stream directly to YouTube or Facebook or Restream or whatever it is you might be using directly from this unit. So there is no computer needed. You may have one, especially if you're running, again, like a slideshow, song lyrics, something like that, off of the computer. But if you're not, you don't actually need a computer anymore to do the streaming. This will do it for you. It also has a USB output on the back, so you can plug this into your computer and it will just show up and look to the computer like a webcam or any other kind of audio video input, which means that you can use it in Zoom. So you can have 4 HDMI channels, you're switching between multiple cameras, all kinds of stuff like that, and then hooking it up into a computer that is then running Zoom or Microsoft Teams, or whatever it is that you might be using and then people on the other end can see whatever it is you bring into this. I think that's a great feature. It does have 2 different audio inputs, so if you're running sound separately through like a soundboard or something like that, you can take a feed from the soundboard, put it into the audio input, or you can have 2 microphone inputs straight on the unit itself. It's also important to note that all the HDMI inputs can bring sound with them as well. So if one of your inputs is coming from a DVD player, a game console, or your computer, you're going to have actually up to 6 audio inputs to choose from, 1 on each of the HDMI, and then 2 additional dedicated 3.5 millimeter on the back. This, again, the Pro models is about $300 right now on Amazon. This is actually the ISO model on top of that. And the ISO comes with an extra neat party trick for an extra $100. And its extra party trick is you can plug into the USB on the back a thumb drive or an external hard drive, any kind of USB-C capable hard drive. You can plug that into the back, and on either one of the Mini Pros, you can record your program. So you can record to that thumb drive into an MP4 file, whatever it is that you are ultimately streaming. What the ISO does is it allows you to record not only that program, but allows you to make independent recordings of all 4 inputs independently and the 2 audio inputs. So this is great if you want to have, say, a multiple camera setup and you want to record all 3 video sources from those cameras and then switch between them later when you edit it. I actually do this in our podcasting space. I have 3 cameras set up to this unit itself, actually, with a USB-C hard drive connected to it. And I record all 3 video inputs from all 3 cameras, and I record the audio input, and all recorded separately. And then in my editing software, I can then, after the fact, go and choose which camera I want to see at the time. That's really helpful in a recording session because it means that I don't have to have somebody actually manning this controller, or I don't have to do it either. You know, switching between whoever happens to be speaking in the moment. I can take care of it, all of it in post when I'm doing my editing, and it's all really straightforward. This works especially well if you're using, this is a Blackmagic product, so if you're using Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve to do your editing, it just all kind of works together really nice. So the first thing you need is something like this. Now, like I said, this is the HDMI version, which means it has the HDMI inputs on the back. They do now sell a version of this that actually has SDI inputs, which if your cameras come with SDI output, may be something you want to consider. The other thing to note is this is 1080p, and so that's what it does. It does not do 4K, so we're going to talk about 4K cameras here in a second, but it does 1080p. That's what it takes in on the input side and what it publishes, out on the streaming side. HD quality 1080p is perfectly acceptable for almost any streaming platform right now. There's not a lot of HD 4K streaming happening yet, so I imagine someday they'll probably come out with a 4K version, but right now it's HD 1080p, and that is wonderful. Okay, so you need this, but you also need to feed this with something, which is where we get to your cameras. I love PTZ cameras, and I especially love them in this form factor. There's small ones and big ones and all kinds of things now. This one is a Smart AV, PTZ, and it's kind of their more basic model in their range, which means that it retails for only $400, which is a tremendous price. A few years ago, you would be lucky at $800 to get something even half as nice as this camera is, but the reason that I like cameras in this form factor is you can see it's got, it does the PTZing, so it does the panning and the tilting, and it does the zooming. It's all remote controllable, which is great, but it has actual lenses in it, which is what you want. A lot of the newer stuff, it's a fixed lens, and so the zoom is happening basically digitally, and that's fine, but I definitely prefer actual lenses, especially if you're going to mount this, say, on like the back wall of your unit or wherever you're recording from, and then zoom in quite a bit. So this is the 20x zoom model, so you can put this 20, 30 feet away from wherever you are and still get a nice tight zoom without a lot of loss of quality, because you're doing the zoom with actual optics and actual lenses. You're not doing a digital zoom, which is inherent, basically just sort of cropping down your picture. So having these kind of units is great. What I like about this one is around back, they've eliminated all the extra ports, all the legacy ports that were from, back when these were predominantly used for things like security cameras and things like that. They've eliminated all that. You don't need it anyway. You're not going to use it. So it's nice to have it not have it cluttering up the back. You've got an HDMI output, which is great. You've got a networking output because you want to connect this to your network so you can control it. And then you've got some USB options because you can run this as a USB camera if you want to. You'll notice that this one actually, it's got a line in. None of these I've seen actually have built-in microphones, which is fine because you tend to mount them so far away from whatever you're streaming anyway. The microphone really wouldn't do you any good and you don't really need it. So you're probably not actually going to use the audio from this anyway. You just really want it to be video. The other thing it offers is power over Ethernet options, which is fantastic, so that the only thing you have to run to this camera is an Ethernet run with a PoE on it, and then the HDMI to basically get the video out, and that tends to work well. Again, this one runs about $400, and you may have noticed if you're eagle-eyed that this is in fact a 4K camera. And the truth is, they're not that much more expensive, maybe $50 more than an HD camera, and it can run in HD mode. So the nice thing is you're kind of future-proofing, so when 4K does come along, you're not having to replace your cameras. You're already set to go there. Maybe you get the latest, ATEM Mini when they come out with a 4K version or something like that. But I would say, especially now at the price point that these are at, there's really no reason not to go ahead and get the 4K camera and just have it, because then you're set to go, whatever comes down the line. So I would say at least two these are really great to have. If you can swing a third, that's great too. Oftentimes you'll have one kind of in the center, kind of mounted towards the back, and then one or two, halfway through your space that can kind of get a nice closer up side shot, whatever it is you want. But having a couple different camera angles to switch between is really helpful, because what it means is that you don't actually have to stream from the camera while you're moving the camera. It can be really hard to move these cameras in such a way that is pleasing to the people watching at home. You're much better off moving it while it's not being shown on screen, and then switching to it after you've done so. But in order to do that, you got to have at least two, and I think it's nice to have three. And at $400 a piece, I mean, again, it's not an insignificant amount of money, but they used to be so much more. All right, and so now the last thing you're gonna need is a way to control it. And controllers have weirdly been resilient to price decreases. About 4 or 5 years ago when I started this channel, they were running, $400 or $500. They're still running $400 or $500. I'm not actually entirely certain why, but that's where they are. There's a lot of different companies that make controllers. It doesn't really matter which one you buy in some ways, because they all use the same basic standards for controlling. There's an OnVIF, and a couple others that, pretty much every camera supports. So they're all going to work well together. It doesn't have to come from the same manufacturer by any means. But there are two things that you will find differentiate between the controllers that you want to think about. One is, do you want to see a preview of the video of the camera you're controlling on the controller itself? Because they don't all have that. This can be important, or it cannot be important. One of the other things that Blackmagic will do is it has an HDMI output for control, and it will actually show you a preview of all your cameras. It will show you what the current program is. It'll show you what you're queuing up next, all that kind of stuff. So if you're using one of these, that's the screen you're probably going to be looking at, and you're not probably going to be looking at the screen on the controller itself. You're going to be using the larger screen that you have hooked up to this guy. However, it can be nice to have one that has, the ability to show you the video feed from it. So that's one thing to consider, is whether you want that or not. So I'll have a couple different options in the description below that offer, either both offer it or don't. That's kind of up to you. It is nice to have this separate rocker switch for zoom. Typically, zoom is also a twisting function on the joystick. Almost all of them do that, but it is nice to have this separate one, so you can do a zoom without manipulating the joystick, because it's easy to try to, just to nudge the camera a little accidentally, left, right, up, or down, while really all you want to do is zoom. So having a separate zoom control is important. The thing that I've discovered is most important about picking a controller is making sure you find one that has camera buttons. So this one, as you can see, these can all control, dozens and dozens of cameras if you want them to. But this one, as you can see, has hot buttons for camera 1 through 4. You're probably only going to have up to 4 cameras anyway. And what this means is that in order to switch between which camera you're controlling, it's a single button press versus a multiple press in order to select a camera. If you didn't have this hot buttons, you'd set cam, and then the number of the camera you want, say 2, and enter. So it's a 3-button press thing to pull up the camera you actually want to control, versus this where it's simply a 1-button press thing. It might not sound like a big deal, but if you're in a production environment, if you're things are moving at all quickly, or you've got like a volunteer, somebody who maybe isn't as well trained, it's a lot easier to teach people how to use the camera hot buttons this way than it is to do it any other way. So we ran a controller for a long time that didn't have the camera buttons, and that was fine, and that one was a little bit cheaper, so that was helpful, but we did finally upgrade our controller really to get those buttons because it just made everything so much nicer. All right, so here I have a kind of a rough sample setup. You can see I've got my PTZ controller, I've got one PTZ camera hooked up, and then the ATEM Mini Pro ISO over here. And so this is the HDMI output for the Mini Pro, and you can see it tells you a lot of good and important stuff. You see previews for all 4 of your sources. So I've got one camera hooked up, that's my computer hooked up. I could have a couple more cameras there. I can see the program feed, what's going out into the world, and then a preview if I'm setting up something else that I want to do ahead of time. I can monitor my audio levels. Over here I don't have any audio hooked up, but I could do that. I can see the status of my recording, and you can see I'm an ISO recording, which means it's going to record all the different channels independently. You can also just do a program recording if you don't want to create that many files, because when you do an ISO you end up with a lot of very large video files, which you may or may not want. And then finally I've got the health of my live stream right there. An additional feature that the Mini Pro has is the ability to have its own built-in media library, which is a little deceiving because really it means pictures, but you can have a picture right there, say a logo or a whatever you want it to be, and then you can switch to that whenever you want. So there we go. I hit the still button, and of course I don't have anything loaded in there, but the red square lets me know that that is indeed what it's talking to. Otherwise I can come back and hit a camera feed button right here, and there you go. So this could be a very nice control center setup for you, where you've got the Mini and then your controller right here to switch between your cameras and control your cameras. And you can see here why, if you want to set it up this way, having a tiny little preview of the camera on this particular controller is maybe not actually that helpful, because chances are you're going to watch them right here on the larger preview screens on the screen that you are looking at anyway. All right, so hopefully this gave you a good overview of a simple, easy to use, fairly affordable setup. You can get into a 2-3 camera system using this stuff for less than $2,000, which even a couple of years ago would have not been possible to do. So it's really nice that you can do that now. And of course you can use it to live stream, or if you take advantage of the recording functions, you can use it to produce, to record and capture content that you'll then edit and publish later, whether for like a podcast or if you're doing like an interview style show or something like that. You've got that flexibility now in a way that, again, you really didn't have before in something this easy to set up and this compact. If you want to know more about the camera, I have a recent video out on the new Smart AV cameras, and you take a look at that one along with some other camera options available. I think there's some videos on the controller and all of that as well. Please like and subscribe, and if you're interested specifically in any of the recommendations, there are links in the description to see more about them. Those links are the #1 way this channel gets supported, so please, please, please use one of those links if you're going to want to do any further investigation on anything we talked about here. All right, well, until I see you again, have a great day.